in 1980 in a little town called Swickley, Pennsylvania, and then moved out to Beaufort, South Carolina after my dad retired. It was tough, actually. I mean, growing up, I had a lot of, home trauma. Growing up with a mom who was, anorexic and bulimic and, had a lot of different personality disorders and things like that was tough for a small kid to process. I also have an older sister. I think I gotta, set that up. So older sister who's got Down syndrome that's 2 years older than me, and then an older brother who was 4 years older than me. So I was the youngest of three. And as a kid, I always felt different, and I didn't understand why, because I didn't look like my brothers and sisters, and I wouldn't find out, the reason for that until I was 27 years old. I had a lot of behavioral issues growing up. So, I can remember the feeling of just not being a part of. For instance, in Beaufort, South Carolina, where we're from, we've got this thing called the Beaufort Water Festival. And every year we have this festival that kicks off with a priest standing on the seawall that blesses this fleet of ships or boats that come by. And the man that raised me at the time thought that it would be a good idea to dress me up in tights and a little tutu. And his friend owned a boat that was called Midsummer Night's Dream. So they dressed me up as this character called Puck and put me in this little dinghy and pulled me in the back. So at that time, I was 8 years old. I hadn't drank a drop of alcohol yet, but I sure did need one. So they expected me to wave to everybody on the seawall at this in Beaufort. And the only thing I did was sat in the back and cried. And I can remember being pulled in by my dad and just his disappointment in me and just never feeling like I could, measure up to what he wanted me to be as a major in the Marine Corps. So, with the behavioral issues that I had, they ended up starting me on Ritalin as a child to where I began to abuse that at a very young age. And then went from that to depression medication, was diagnosed bipolar, and I started dabbling in a little bit of pot at 11. But when I did my first line of cocaine at 15, it was probably the first time in my life that I ever took a full breath. It was unbelievable. The next day I woke up and was like, what the hell was that? And from that moment, I can remember I was going to do everything that I could do at that time to find that wholeness with that substance for the rest of my life. So I started my first treatment center at 18 years old, and when I went into my first intervention for drug and alcohol treatment, I was mad. I vented all my frustration to the interventionist in the room, the stranger, and told him, like they were trying to take the one thing away from me that made me feel okay. So they sent me down to Florida. I went down there with a cocaine addiction. I came out with an opioid addiction. So I ended up getting into this program that was a non-insurance-based facility in Florence, South Carolina. And when I pulled up the hill after all these treatment programs, I still thought if I could leave the alcohol and drugs alone, my life would get better. But what I was experiencing, what they taught me, is that when I was removed from alcohol and drugs, I didn't get better. In a way, I got worse. It was that feeling that I felt when I was separated from the alcohol and drugs. And I get into this guy's office, and this guy sits on the other side of this desk, and I'm telling him about things about my mom and all of this stuff about my sister and my dad. And he was the first person in my life that listened to me. And then after that, he said, "You'll never get sober." And I said, "Excuse me, sir?" And he said, "Do you hear me, boy?" I said, "You'll never get sober." And I stood up, and he stood up, and he looked at me, and he said, "Sit the down." And as I'm sitting down in the most calm voice ever, he said, "I love you, son." And, when he said those words to me, I knew that he meant it. And he said, "Let me tell you why, Brian." He says, "Because it's not till you stop playing the victim and you start playing the victor that your life's going to change." He said, "Instead of talking about these problems, why don't you let me help you start talking to them?" And from that moment, he flipped. I don't know if it was just that moment in my life in 2009 in Florence, South Carolina, but he changed my life that day with that statement. I didn't like a lot of the things that he had to say. What I didn't know was eventually he was going to become my father-in-law. And I had been married to his daughter now for 12 years. my wife and I decided to that we were going to move and start our own thing and start helping some people, and that we could do some things better and structure it a little bit more, and give men and women an opportunity to alleviate their guilt and shame by helping others and being serious about their recovery. We've been a staple here in Greenwood. We've been supporting people from all over the country, and including Canada, and we get them an opportunity to come in here and get sober and to give back to the ones that are coming in behind them. The 12 steps were a great base for me, but I continue to evolve that through other therapies and things. I think what makes my life so exciting today is that the concept of understanding that the obstacles for me today are the way, right? It helps me to know myself. It helps me to see the things inside. I'm more obsessed with why do I react to a situation like this? Why do I feel this way? Or why is this person making me feel this way? Or where is this coming from? And then I'm obsessed about doing that work and asking God to help me to remove that on a daily practice of prayer and meditation in the morning, at night, and being able to utilize the program that's been taught to me to know myself. And I just don't know that there's a better game in town than that,